Today we're going to be building the M63 locking liner folder kit from knifekits.com. First we're going to go ahead and unbox it and make sure we've got everything we need. The blade, two of our sets of handle scales, and the two steel liners, the pocket clip, the spacer, and our hardware. Now this hardware is really small, so what we recommend that you do is just take the lid of your box and dump everything in there, and that lid is big enough that you can do most of your work in there. So you should have all the screws that you need, and the washers, and your pivot and pivot screw. So we're going to start with the liner lock side. Right, so that's the locking side of your liner. Make sure that the lock bar is facing down towards the ground. Get the correct side scale, and then we're just going to put one of the screws in right now. And then you can get one of our max drivers if you want for the Torx bits, or if you have a Torx screwdriver laying around with different size bits, you can just use that. So we're just going to snug that right in there, and then we're going to go ahead and put the pivot in. And just snug it in there. Nothing to turn, it's just going to kind of stick in a little bit. And then turn it over, and now we are going to drop one of our washers in. And then next we're going to set the blade on. When you set the blade on, just make sure that that lock bar is behind the blade, so the blade's actually locked. Then we're going to drop our other bearing washer on there. All right, next up we're just going to set our back spacer and line it up with the holes as best we can. And then lay our other liner on there. Again, line it up best you can, so that when we put our screws in, we don't run into any problems. You want to be careful here, not cross thread them. When you're watching us make this kit, we are not using any type of Vibratite or Loctite or anything like that, because this is just a dry fit and we're showing you how to do it. We do recommend that once you kind of assemble it, make sure everything looks good to you. You probably want to take it back apart and then use some Vibratite, which you can get from us. I recommend a little red pack because it'll give you enough for doing this, and you don't have a lot of waste because it can dry up over time. These don't need to be super tight. Again, these are micro threads, so if you try and crank down on them, you're going to strip them. That's why you're better off just putting some Vibratite on them and then just getting them down snug. All right, now let's go ahead and put our other handle scale on there. And again, these do not need to be super tight. Like I said, a little bit of the red Vibratite, and it will hold it together perfectly. Then we're going to put our pivot screw in. Once you get it started, go ahead and fold it. As you can see, that blade is over to one side. So now what you want to do is you're going to tighten that pivot screw, because that's going to get your blade centered up. So the trick here is you want to get your blade centered up. You want to test, make sure that the knife opens and closes smoothly, and that it's not too stiff, and that when it's open, the blade doesn't have a lot of wiggle back and forth. So once you get that right, again, if you do not use Vibratite, then over time that blade will come loose. It's not that huge of a deal usually. You can feel it doing that, and you can tighten it back down. But again, highly recommend getting that red Vibratite packet. Now for doing the pocket clip, it's a little tricky getting those screws in there. So what you can do is, if you've got a magnet, just rub your torx bit up against it for just a few seconds, and that'll kind of magnetize that torx bit just a little bit temporarily, which will allow you to hang on to those teeny tiny screws and get them in there. Another important thing to make sure of is, because again, these are micro screws, be careful when you're threading them in that you do not cross thread them, because since it doesn't take much pressure, they would be pretty easy to cross thread. So you want to make sure when you're going in that it feels very smooth and easy when you're screwing these in before you start tightening them down. And then when you do the final tightening, again, just snug. They don't need to be super tight. And there you have it. You just built your M63 flipper. Hope you enjoyed it.